All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Bobby Steinsdorfer. On behalf of my partner, Casey Skatovich, my co-moderator and host here, welcome. I'm glad you all could be here. You know, we know claims has always been kind of the promise that we do as an industry, right? That's where we stress test our client experience. That's where we get to learn a bunch about the bets that we're making and the risks that we're taking on. That's always been true. What we're hearing a lot from our clients recently, and it's headlines, all this information and data coming at people, all these macro topics, and then really trying to help people think about where they spend their time, both from a capital perspective and where they're putting their investments in their organizations. And that's really what drove this topic and bringing this panel together. So I'm excited about the group we have here and being able to share that information with you all. For a little context, why don't I hit on the folks? We have Megan Bock, Chief Operating Officer at Federato. We have Joe Lattis, VP of Claims at Reserve. We have Stacy Graham, VP of Claims at CNA, and Mary Thompson, our analytics leader at Lockton. So again, a good panel, and I think what you're going to see is a good perspective across the claims value chain, if you will, getting a lot of their perspective. So to that end, we'll just jump right in. And Mary, I'm going to start with you. And again, some of the conversations actually came up as we were sitting here, really thinking about what our clients are asking us and preparing for renewals in this current environment. I guess maybe my question would be, what are they coming into those renewals with from an information and assumption perspective? And maybe where does that have gaps, and where is that hitting the reality of what they're doing as they come into their renewals? I think that'll lay a good context of the current state of claims force to get us going.
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception is maybe not always understanding their T-core or what's driving that. A lot of times we see clients focusing on frequency and saying, oh, well, my frequency's down. But the frequency isn't always what's driving your total cost of risk, right? It's a lot of times it's a very small number of claims that are driving 80, 90% of your cost. So if you're not managing those claims well, then that's really where, they fall short and they're not telling the full story. So I think us, being able to help them use data, use analytics to tell that story, to truly understand what drives the T-core, how they can improve that, what changes they've made, whether it's investments in safety, investments in return to work, things like that, and show with data how you're progressing, how things have changed over the last year, how claims have developed over the last year, better understanding that and prepping for that story to be able to share with underwriters, to share with markets. It's going to help them to better prepare for those questions that may come at them as to, how's your business doing? How are your claims doing? How are you going to progress? And it helps to reduce premiums, reduce collateral, reduce overall retained losses.
No, that's great. And maybe I should give it a little context too. We're going to go through a little bit of the current state, and as Mary just said, what are we seeing from data and technology and how that's applying, and then where we're headed. You can see everyone's kind of got our cliff notes and cheat sheets here, but a lot of it will be the conversation between this group, and also welcome questions from you all as we go through today. So maybe staying there, Stacy, from the carrier perspective, how is those assumptions and those ideas showing up at your desk, and how you're thinking about some of the things that are happening in your portfolio?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think you used the word gap, right, between what the buyers are expecting or how they come into like a renewal meeting. And there are two different realities in this conversation, right? There's what the buyer or the insured thinks is going on and thinks is going to affect their pricing and their terms, and what is actually happening. So when these conversations occur, I think trust can disintegrate, and also it can delay the process of writing that policy. But what's happening is, in my view, is that the buyers, insureds are looking at, well, I've only had this many claims and I've only paid out this amount and my business is going great. But I'm looking at, well, what are your reserves on the existing claims that have not resolved, and how are they trending? And what's going on with expense management on your claims? People don't look at that. Are your expenses trending upward? That's going to affect your overall loss outcomes, right? And then the other things they don't look at, there are quite a few, but I hear a lot from insureds about if I warn them about the risk of a claim. Well, that's not going to happen, Stacy. I'm in Little Rock, Arkansas, and things like that don't happen here. And I'm like, maybe you have not fully researched what is going on in Arkansas and stuff is happening, but also there are a lot of venues like Arkansas that are indicators of what's going to happen or what could happen. You need to understand that too. It takes a lot of work for them to do that. And when you look at severity trending, all of those things play into it, into what their uncertainties are. And there's one more factor, if you don't mind me just speaking one more. The other factor that we're seeing more and more lately with private equity injections, with consolidation, is the complexity of the organizational structures. So I know they come to you and they say, well, we've acquired this, we've merged with this, whatever, or we've had a PE injection. But what does that mean in the claims world? It actually can mean something quite significant because those are things that juries really hate. And they'll deliver that message with money.
I think that's a good point that you touched on there. Understanding the market trends of when you think of a carrier, obviously you're going through your own renewal and you're thinking through your own business, but they have a book of business that is much larger, and they have to contemplate, the trends within that book of business. And while you may not have experienced the claim yet, doesn't mean you can't experience that. So having that in the back of your mind of, what procedures do you have in place if this event occurred to prevent this becoming, a mass claim or things like that, of just preventing the claim altogether. But just understanding, making sure you're up on date on the market trends, thinking of things like auto liability. Obviously there's been a lot of conversation around that and reserves increasing on that, just continually seeing the severity increase. Understanding those trends will help you to tell your story more effectively as it relates to those trends.
So Joe, being intertwined, this is a great conversation, being intertwined in all of this, obviously the TPA and AI enabled, how are you helping inform, instruct, whether it has to do with frequency, jurisdictional considerations?
So I think our goal is to kind of fill that void that you mentioned where our customers don't always know what goes into their loss pick, and they think exactly frequency's down, my expenses are down, my indemnity's down. We want to provide a better look at these data trends that are basically not always thought about. There's the tent poles in our organization, like time to close, time to first payment, time to liability. We want to go a little bit deeper and be able to give you guys really digestible data when it comes to Little Rock, Arkansas. Like what actually goes on there, who's driving through where. I'm all things wheels. So we are really attuned to, in the Midwest, people think Chicago is awful and for litigation purposes, but I can tell you there's a couple counties in rural Ohio where I'm from that you definitely don't want to end up in. So we want to be able to give you digestible data, not just anecdotes, and say, all right, here's how many claims you've had in Lorain County, Ohio, and actually the expenses are driving harder here because claims are more difficult to settle. And another big piece is from a customer to customer perspective, you guys may have different expectations. We want to be able to take ourselves and insert us and say, if you're really focused on this portion of your book, how can we give you those data points? So really it's where can we fit in and kind of provide new looks of data, new cuts of data to make ourselves and our underwriting practices more healthy.
Just listening to that, and I heard Arkansas, Ohio, trends. Megan, maybe go in here, maybe across the group. Sentence or two on your view of the current trends in the landscape of what we're seeing in claims.
Yeah, I mean, I think my perspective at it, and just for sort of background, Federato is a technology platform that is providing both underwriting, policy administration, as well as claims handling capabilities. And so it really is the solution in which carriers or MGAs can leverage to manage their claims. I think the kinds of trends that we're hearing, whether it's judicial hellholes or nuclear verdicts or sort of the onus that can come from different types of ownership structures and things like that. Like all of those are really relevant. I think one of the things that we haven't really touched on yet is weather and catastrophe related claims and sort of the predictive approach that can be made available, based on climate change, based on, the trends that are happening there, that having the right sort of tools and AI capabilities can help with not just sort of hindsight look of what has happened in your specific experience or your specific account, but projection, what might happen based on the various locations where you have office space or where your trucks are transporting goods, or that type of a thing. I think that is where all of our perspectives really come together is how do you use the latest and greatest technology to actually have forward-looking and predictive capabilities that can influence the decisions that are being made, not just on a claims handling or adjudication basis, but on an underwriting decisioning basis, right? Before that risk is undertaken or in determining the right terms, conditions, and price for that exposure. That's kind of the way I think about it.
Anyone else want to add on?
Well, asking me to talk about litigation trends and one or two things is very challenging. But I will say that the severity drivers in litigation are only partially now driven by the nature of the claim and liability, by injury or damages. That's only part of it. There's much more going on, and those drivers are outpacing the tools that we have to mitigate them. So we are outpaced in our underwriting tools, our pricing, our risk management, all of it. Certainly the plaintiff's bar is outpacing the defense bar, that's very well known, but all of the other drivers that underlie severity, and there are multiple, are moving much faster than we are able to do as an insurance carrier.
Yeah, and I think the time is certainly more important than ever too, because our clients were having conversations. Naturally, we tend to look at what happened or what's happening now, and also they struggle with too underwriting posturing too in anticipation of what's to come. So how do you grapple with that? How do you help inform brokers that you're working with? I'd love to hear, those perspectives.
Well, we have to have a really tight relationship with the brokers, the underwriters, the risk management team, and the actuarial team. And so we do a number of things around that. Claims is also expected in very real time to identify what could be a trend indicator in an individual claim. And then we also, and we use AI for this, to pull data across other claims to see if we're seeing that trend in other claims, in other lines, and then we immediately report that up. We have product boards within our company, so those are multifunctional boards that meet every month, and they've got all the functions in them. They have subcommittees. We talk about emerging trends a lot. For example, healthcare. What are we seeing in the way healthcare is now delivered? What are we seeing in the ownership of healthcare, which is becoming heavily PE owned? And how is that going to affect claims, and what can we do about it? So and we have an interdisciplinary social inflation committee, for example, that includes all functions and also government relations, because one of the most effective ways to attack that is through government lobbying and influence, and we try to do that a lot. So there's some ways to do it, and we're doing all of them.
Maybe pausing here as we think about this, anything resonating with this group or any questions surfacing?
Maybe one question. So I know a lot of what we are talking about also has to do with the right quality of data that is the foundation of all the solutions that is created. How are you thinking about governance of that overall data? So are you seeing any the latest technology bringing in any new trends on how the governance is being managed?
So if you don't mind, I'll speak to that. I typically say reserve is a data company 1A and then a TPA 1B. We have a team of engineers and data scientists. I'm a claims guy, so they, to me, are the brightest people on the planet, and they probably are. But with the rapid evolution of the capabilities we have to sift through free-form data, the notes, right? Everything's in a note. It's probably acronyms right, left, and center. So we utilize our people in our AI platforms to go through and take that and make it a structured data set. And on top of that, we go and work with our carrier partners or our brokers, and if there's a specific issue that they're having, we can inject it in there and look to that point, whether it's some litigation trend or a venue trend. But the data quality piece is something we're really focused on because like the example I was dealing with yesterday was if you have Joe Lattice's law firm, but you spell my name 8 different ways wrong, you're not going to, like traditionally, you would not be able to pull that data and know, hey, how are we doing against them? But some of these technologies that we have coming to the forefront are allowing us to raise these to our adjusters and say, hey, is this actually the law firm you're against? And basically do an accept or deny, reviewing the data sets. So we make sure that we have that health piece involved, and it's always scanning our files. So if fields are missed, we go back and populate. If something appears to be spelled incorrectly, we can go back and fix that. It's really QAing the files in real time, constantly, to make sure that we close those gaps and are able to give our partners more information that's accurate to then make underwriting decisions.
I'll just tack on, I think part of the data governance really comes down to the technology and the sort of unified and standardized data schemas that you're leveraging across both claims data, underwriting data, policy data, actuarial and predictive data. And so having a technology provider or a data warehouse or whatever the structure that you're using that has a standardized and federated data schema that is consistent, that is what actually is going to enable A, the governance, B, the quality, and C, sort of the monitoring and utilization of the most relevant data at the point of decision, right? Whatever that decision is, whether that's a reserve decision, whether that's a risk decision, claims adjudication decision. I think that is one of the really biggest trends that I think most organizations have become really aware of, is regardless of what technology you use, it all comes down to the data schema and the organization and maintenance thereof in order to be able to use it effectively.
And I would just add on to that too. I think 5 to 10 years ago, if you had data and you had, something like this built out, you were ahead of the game. That's no longer the case. A way to be ahead of the game now is, how are you using that data? Are you using it to make decisions, to change how you've looked at things historically? It's almost to the point now where if you have data and you're not using it effectively, you're being penalized. So just keep that in mind of just making effective decisions and changing the way you think. Challenging assumptions that you've always had based on the data is how you're going to get ahead and set yourself apart from your peers.
So maybe stay there and take us through that a little bit. I mean, we've always had predictive analytics and we've had some of these pieces. Now it's getting hyper-fueled by different tools, right? LLMs and this generative AI. What does that look like? Can you talk us through a little bit of what that looks like in practice? And then thinking about these stakeholders, how does it hit a traditional carrier, our engagement with our clients? How does it hit a TPA? What's the technology look like? I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, I'd say for predictive analytics, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's going to tell you the exact value that your claim is going to end up. It certainly does that, but I'm not going to tell you that it's always accurate, right? The goal of predictive analytics and the real value of it is to identify claims that you maybe wouldn't look at normally. It could be a claim, we've talked a lot about jurisdictions and a hard jurisdiction. It could be a claimant with comorbidities. It could be a claimant that has filed multiple claims in the past, or perhaps it's just seems like a normal slip, trip, fall, but there are other factors that could drive this to be a large claim if we're thinking comp right now. But it's the way that you use it to be proactive on claims that I think is the true innovator of AI and predictive analytics. It's identifying claims that would otherwise go unlooked, assigning them the appropriate resources to that claim, whether it's having more contact with it from the company's side, or it's assigning it to another adjuster that is maybe better focused on that type of claim or more severe claims. So I think it really ties in the carrier, the TPA, and gives them a different conversation to be had based on looking at a different profile of claims versus just, I'm going to look at claims that are $50,000 or greater. Well, those are probably already getting the attention that they need. Let's look at the claims that are maybe $10,000 right now but have potential to become very severe. So it changes the conversation and brings to light just different claims that should be focused on.
Yeah, I mean, I like to use the analogy too. Like sometimes it's the big claims, yeah, they're important, right? But the toothpaste is very much out of the bottle. It's those where it hasn't really poured out yet. and you really want to get your eyes and pulse on. So Stacey, I guess from the underwriting seat, do you take just as close of an eye on even those smaller claims and whether the reserves are less, and knowing
Yeah, it's really interesting because that's volume, right? When the smaller claims, and we have done that with predictive analytics with AI, is to identify the trends that we did not spot. I mean, most claims people, if they've been working in their line for a while, they can tell you off the top of their head what are the 5 top severity drivers, but they can't tell you the ones that are sort of hidden and you can't really identify. And we actually did that recently with AI in the lawyer's malpractice book, and and we're addressing it immediately, like, okay, let's get a risk solution in there and do that. But we didn't appreciate that was going on in a sector of that book of business that typically didn't see a lot of severity. So
one of the things, if I can just jump in, one of the things that really resonated with me earlier in my sort of AI journey, and most folks are familiar with what AI can do, but I came from, I came from 20 years on the carrier side, underwriting and leading underwriting teams in a more traditional sort of manner, and now I work at a technology firm that is leveraging AI native capabilities. And 3, 4, 5 years ago, people were thinking about AI as a way of staff augmentation, if you will, sort of substituting, right? Like automating a maybe low value activity that was being done by a human. And sure, that capability exists and can be used to drive some efficiencies. But the analogy that really resonated with me was not what is the one-for-one substitution that you can make of a low-value activity, but instead, what if you had 10,000 humans who could all do any single thing that you wanted, research, analysis, investigation? What then would the decision be brought forward? What then would you do? That's what AI can really do. And so that's actually what I think is relevant as you think about those, high frequency or lower severity claims, right? If you've got 10,000 humans who can get in and look through every single file and look through every single jurisdiction and comorbidity, then you could come out with a really relevant, predictive outcome. That's what the technology is able to do. It's not just sort of like one for one, okay, now you no longer have to input this information from this system to that system. It's that really heavily magnified resource and intelligence that can be leveraged.
Yeah, and if I can build on that
Please.
a little bit. And at the individual claim level, taking those administrative tools off enables the claims professionals to do what matters most. Negotiate, evaluate, talk to human beings, talk to the plaintiff's lawyers, and really dive deeper into the claim. We use AI for that too, right? To help us understand better what are the gaps in the plaintiff's case that I can leverage, what are the gaps in our case that I need to fill. And they're not doing the, all the routine sending the letters and doing all the stuff that AI can take over, so.
Right, it adds an element of speed. We're no longer copying and pasting Word documents that are saved on our desktop that are probably old. It's all working to help our adjusters be on the phones more, talking to human beings, evaluating claims as opposed to working spreadsheets. And interesting, from my seat, what's been really interesting is traditionally when I grew up, I was in the claims side at carrier, and we didn't have a whole lot of interface just as a department with underwriting and actuaries. But I think the movement of technology has forced us to be more in tune with each other and know, what are you looking for and how can we focus on that so we raise it to underwriting quicker, so you guys can make decisions quicker. That's really what it comes down to. We want decision making fast. We don't want any late reserve changes. We don't want anything to be sitting there 2 years later, litigation comes in. It allows our people to be really good people in managing other people, managing the claims.
So Megan, you talked about the policy admin. Don't cut Megan short. She was an adjuster back in the early days, so it's touched all of these seats.
Yep.
But you guys are building infrastructure to do exactly what Joe just mentioned.
Yep.
We could get into the nitty gritty of that, but maybe thinking about a leader in this room, being at a carrier or a client, when someone has that connection and can measure outcome to the bets they're making, what are they seeing show up there and why invest there?
Yeah, I think it's part of the forward motion for the industry is recognizing that while insurance in general is a risk-averse industry and is making safe bets based on sort of the rear view mirror, it's actually how do we leverage technology to have foresight and predictive ability and actually change the outcomes versus just sort of reflect back on what's happened previously. And so, as we look at connecting the dots really immediately and in real time with a singular data schema for claim outcomes with underwriting decisions, it actually allows that ability to spot trends, raise predictions, and make underwriting decisions that drive claim outcomes, and then measure in real time like how that's going and be able to adjust on the fly. It's really shortening that loop between sort of identifying an issue in the claims space and changing the underwriting practices. I'll date myself, but Bobby's right. I started my career as a workers' compensation claims adjuster, and I had some big, ugly, heavy reserved cases on my caseload. I then, several years later, moved into underwriting, and I was probably the most conservative underwriter in the bunch because I had seen what could be the outcome of those individual cases. Well, those are the analyses that I'm making based on my personal experience, right? And there's a delay. There's a multi-year lag time on that. It's relevant to acknowledge that, I had claims on my caseload that had dates of injury from before I was born, right? Like these are things that take a long time to develop. And so shortening that lag time and connecting the dots much more quickly so that insurance organizations that are here to ensure that, individuals, businesses, communities are able to be proactive, handle their risk, and continue to not just survive but thrive. Being able to shorten that timeline and that loop is really powerful. And so the companies that are making the bets with us and saying, I actually want the same technology and the same data schema and organization to handle sort of our claims outcomes as our underwriting decisions and policy decisions, are making that bet that they actually think that in market cycles that could be more volatile, that are tighter, that you need to be able to react more quickly. They're making the bet that by connecting the data sources and making sure that those trends are immediately spotted and are turned from claims outcome into underwriting guidance into actual AI-based automation and decisioning that's happening on every single policy, on every single decision, that they're going to influence the shape of their profit trends and their businesses. So, I think that's the direction that the industry needs to go. It's not like there's a whole lot of margin in the insurance business, right? And so every penny counts. And so when you can identify trends more quickly and change the decisions that are being made that will have those outcomes in real time, it makes a really big difference to these organizations.
I think we've always had that spirit of that virtuous circle between those two groups, and again, hoping this empowers us and allows us to hit on the behaviors that our people want to do. So,
Yeah.
Megan, I'm curious too, just with that said and all the value you're adding in helping inform better decisions, what is still perhaps a misconception or two that you come up against, or said differently, people are not appreciating enough to move forward more efficiently, effectively?
Maybe not where you expect me to go, but insurance is still very much a people business. And at the end of the day, the technology, the system, the AI tooling can recommend or even automate specific decisions. But generally speaking, and from a regulatory perspective, humans still have the ability to overrule that, make their own decisions, decide that they know better because of their gut reaction or the claim that they saw that one time in that one circumstance. And so I think that
as I look at companies that are running like proofs of concept and things like that, and are working towards making something fully productionized, I think that that's where things can get held up, is by not effectively running the change management that is required to ensure that humans that are a part of this process really understand what their role is, where they truly add value, and where they should rely on the technology to do what the AI and the technology is best equipped to do. Because both skills are really important, they're just different. And so I think it can get muddled when, when those responsibilities are mixed.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And Mary, I'm thinking about how claims also inform better safety, better policies and procedures in the field, if you will. Talk about that a little bit. How do you leverage all of this data and insight?
Yeah, I think historically, and even still today, sometimes we see that those roles are very siloed. The biggest gap is getting to that common goal. Everybody wants, a safe workplace, a safe environment, but it's understanding how you use the data, the resources, the technology to get there in a common way. So everyone is great. Safety is great at what they do. Claims is great at what they do. Risk managers are really great at what they do. CFOs are great, and analytics is great at producing reports, but it's not until you have that accountability and the data to support it to all come together and drive to a common goal that you're going to be able to see results. So it's safety talking to claims about here's what we're doing to prevent claims, or maybe here's what we're doing to effectively improve our return to work program, and this is where it should pay off from a claims perspective. Or claims speaking with the CFO and saying, here are some claims that we have that are really becoming a problem. What can we do to potentially settle these claims or get just different outcomes for that, and having the conversations with the adjusters and the carriers to just make sure that everybody is on that same page, moving towards a common goal and supporting it with the data to be able to really prove the outcomes that can be made versus just letting things play out as they will.
I think, did we have a question over here earlier?
I'm just going to ask, when you think about AI and the lines of business that has been most successful in terms of bending the cost curve, I'm just kind of interested where you guys are seeing early successes. Are there certain lines that are more?
I personally see it in the workers' compensation space first, just because there is so much data available there. It's first party. You're not dealing with a third party for curveballs that could be thrown. So work comp, I think it's the strongest right now, but it's certainly expanding into auto liability, products liability. It's expanding rapidly, but work comp is where it really started and took off. And I think it's probably the strongest there, but I'd be interested in your opinions as well.
I think on the wheels side, that's where we get a lot of headlines. Is it what's showing up?
And it's just been such a rapid expansion, right? So the trucks, the cars, the vans are all adding their own bits of technology. Now we have the ability to ingest it in real time and really make decisions based on trends. On the trucking side, that's kind of my baby. That's where I came from. But large losses every time one of these vehicles hits something, and now we can make the decisions quickly to shut these claims down. And like to your point, the margins are so low, especially on that side, that it's allowing us to kind of find creative ways to build in some margins and hopefully make it so more companies can exist in this atmosphere where all we read about are nuclear verdicts, all we read about are bad venues. So really in that industry, we're seeing a lot of headway being made.
And I would think for the same reason of work comp, the lower level property claims, because there's so much data, they're pretty simple claims, not a lot of complexity. I mean, it is definitely not showing up quickly in complex third-party liability claims, where it's much harder to deploy it, right? Because the claims are different.
Yeah, one there, and then we'll come to Nirain.
Essentially, great point.
I mean, I can speak to claims aspect of the carriers, which is, what you want to save money and affect that bottom line is you want better claims outcomes overall. You want to spend less on loss, you want to spend less on legal expense, right? And so where AI comes into play, if our people are using it correctly, we increase speed to resolution, that saves the expense, typically also lowers the loss because plaintiffs are more willing to accept less earlier on in the claim. It can also enable us to do much deeper research that provides better leverage to negotiate for a better price. If we can combine those, a better price, and do it earlier, then we really affect the bottom line. I can give you a simple example of that if that would help, which is, we used AI recently on a potentially large claim to really explore the venue and what is it doing, what verdicts have come out in our line of business, but also in others, what levers are being pulled, and we found a nuclear verdict that had literally just occurred the previous week and would definitely drive up the value of our claim because it was similar. Plaintiff was going to know about it. They weren't going to take what they would take before. So we thought, do they know about it yet? You're right. Maybe they don't. And so we got in and anchored really fast with a reasonable number, not a low ball, and said, look, we're not interested in spending the money on the mediator. It was scheduled. Let's just see if we can chat, and talk it through. We got that thing settled within 2 days. They didn't know about it. And had they known, the bottom line on that claim would have been far higher.
I think, Ian, maybe this panel we can hit on a little bit, but came up in one of our others as well. And really, your point's well taken, right? It was a lot on, if you're from a carrier perspective, on lowering the expense ratio. We're hearing a lot about efficiency plays. That's where the proverbial low-hanging fruit has been. Where you are seeing this bend is where people can then go have different decisions. Where do they have confidence to enter a geography, enter a product line, enter a coverage, add an endorsement, whatever that may look like, giving them the confidence, as Megan said, looking ahead, and then bringing that back where they don't have to be in a territory and say, hey, we're going to go into West Virginia and contracting, and we have to spend 10 years there before we can see those outcomes. You're starting to see some folks, specifically around managing general agents or that managing general underwriters, start to take the expertise that they've built in a traditional carrier or from a wholesaler and leverage this technology. So I think, again, more to come there. I share some after a little bit, but maybe not the exact forum for it, but definitely where people want to move. How do you drive growth? How do you drive top line versus just the efficiency play? So an awesome topic.
So one general question and one claims question specifically. In general, as you think about AI usage, some of you from Federato, like you're offering a platform. Yeah. Some of the others, like CNA, you're using something. How do you weigh the cost benefit? So you gain something on productivity, we are all talking about it. You gain some in decision support, but you're exposing yourself to AI application. So how are you or your clients thinking about that? And number two, this is more of a claims question, so maybe Stacey, more for you. As some of these things start to show up, how are you guys thinking about which policy pays?
Yeah, we'll tackle that hard one later, if we have time. But your question about how are we deploying it in claims to get to the better result. There are so many uses that we are deploying it for. We have a lot of governance around it within the company. We have a specifically governance team, which is actually growing like crazy to make sure that we're doing the right thing. But we're trying out a number of different things. How do we make the cost benefit? We just had an innovation summit. We had 17 companies come in and tell us what they can do. The ones we have contracted with so far are things like document analysis, medical records analysis, predictive next best action. All of those things we've determined the cost benefit is there. The cost benefit of the other things, there are some things I really would love to have, is being analyzed now, right? This is moving so fast. From my perspective, to the question about how do you fix the bottom line, also how do you impact the bottom line? If my claims teams are better, faster at what they do, that impacts the bottom line. So if I'm hiring somebody in with 2 years experience, but I can use AI tools, role-playing tools, just everything to get them to work at a higher level really fast, it's gonna impact the bottom line so much faster. Really excited about that. The question of which policy applies is a really difficult one. I was sharing that we have some brokers and insureds that are asking us to come out on behalf of claims and say, hey, if you get a claim that arises out of your AI use, your existing policy will cover that. And that, we're looking at that, but that's a very difficult thing to do because AI is not one thing. It's so many different things and it changes constantly. And your AI use, insured, is going to change differently. Maybe now you're using it for scheduling or writing things or analyzing big documents, but tomorrow you're going to outsource a piece of your business to an AI vendor, right? And I think you shared with me, you don't think those AI vendors are going to be legally liable at the end of the day. I could maybe make that argument, but so what are we insuring? What are the professional services, for example, that we're insuring? And are they covered by this policy, and should they be if we're not pricing for it? It's very challenging. It's particularly challenging in the healthcare space, which is being taken over by AI in so many different respects so quickly. And I don't yet think we really know everything that we're insuring and what policy will apply. There are no standalone AI policies in my lines. We don't have any exclusions on the policies, right? So we have to figure it out fast.
The only thing I would add, not to the harder part of that question, but to the sort of cost-benefit analysis, is there are a number of core technologies that insurance organizations already have to purchase, right, have to spend on, that are sort of the core table stakes, your policy administration systems and things like that. And whether those are too expensive for what they're providing is, I think, probably just a true statement. But that being said, they sort of are what they are. And as you think about the sort of cost-benefit analysis, what I would suggest and what we're seeing largely is that many of those core technologies that are already a part of the sort of business operation in insurance are providing AI-enabled capabilities on top or natively incorporated, in which case there isn't an incremental cost for leveraging these sort of AI technologies, in which case it becomes a much cleaner and clearer equation, right? Because if you can also accrue the benefits that come from, leveraging the power of 1,000 or 10,000 humans to do a thing that previously you had one claims adjuster or one underwriter doing for the same cost that you were already paying, that makes total sense. I think as you see companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and others sort of come in, the costs are evolving but are normalizing, and a lot of that is sort of incorporated in your standard technology stack. And so I think that the question is no longer, does it make sense to purchase this? It is, how much and what benefit can I get from the core technologies that I'm already buying? And if the core technologies I'm already buying don't offer that, well, then maybe I should explore something that does. That's kind of the way I'm seeing the technology landscape evolving, and some of these conversations happening, with the CEOs or the boards, because these are boardroom decisions in most carrier and MGA spaces. I think it's very much expected that AI be a part of the sort of go forward vision. So it's how much can you get for what you're either already spending or less.
So Megan, I know the vision of every carrier party is going to be different, generally speaking. Everyone wants to grow, everyone wants to be profitable. Though with that, I guess, where is AI missing in the equation? Like even Stacey, 17 different vendors, providers, right? But like in the end, like what is really missing from AI today to truly help?
So my take is that the core opportunities or functions are available. To Stacey's point, there's 17 different vendors that do different things, right? And so there are any number of point solutions that can solve a specific problem. There's probably a few that haven't been solved, but I'm pretty sure there's somebody out there that is in the process of solving them right now. I think what misses is how does it actually get unified and come together and be able to be operationalized in a large carrier setting or a large MGA? Because The truth of insurance is much more complex than I have this single point solution that's going to solve this single problem. It actually is, how is this incorporated in the sort of end-to-end workflow, from policy submission through quote process, through binding, issuance, endorsement, claim handling, outcomes, and then looping it back around. So where I think it is missing is the sort of universe of how it all comes together and is operationalized to impact from sort of start to finish or any point along there, because individual point solutions can't do it with the same level of impact as something that is more holistic.
So culture at the end of the day.
Well, I was gonna say, we hit on this, like all this information coming, all of these abilities. We talked about the kind of the silo buckets. It could be Mary, it could be Stacy on this, but how do you, easier said than done, how do you tackle this? And then how do you take what Megan articulated around this data story and translate that into a data advantage? How do you actually action this rather than just sitting in this bucket of all your data and analytics, I guess, to simplify it?
Yeah, I mean, you don't think about it in a siloed way, right? Like, you don't just have the claims person come to you and say, well, I really need this for claims. You have, not only a data governance, an AI governance committee, but also an AI team of people that brings all these functions together and says, this would help me, but that would help you. And then you develop an enterprise solution that will get the best bang for the buck and really affect the bottom line. You have to have people who know what they're doing to be able to bring that together. And I think that's the only way to get
So how do you bring that together? Maybe this is one for you too. How do you bring that together when there isn't necessarily that awareness or appreciation or buy-in at the top that's really driving that culture?
I think you have to change the conversation. You have to have the buy-in at the top to be able to show, why is this meaningful? What can this do for us? It's not just producing dashboards that we're going to check, every month or every quarter, whatever it is. It's using the data, and you said it. It's action. You have to be able to take action and be willing to take action based on what the data is informing you of. It's not just to say, yeah, I looked at it, great, let's keep going. I'm going to change and challenge how I make decisions, and I'm going to be open to that change and being able to go from the top and change the culture to be accepting of that and accepting of the usage of AI, and being able to then show through data what the savings can be is how you're going to make the impact. It all comes back to the bottom line, right? How are we going to reduce costs? And if you can proof of concept show that this can reduce costs, then I think you'll easily get that buy-in.
And I think that's a great point. Like AI kind of gets an amorphous wrap. People say AI and it encompasses a lot of things. But to your point too, Meg, it solves a lot of problems. So for that proof of concept, come in and say, here's our issue. It's leakage with vehicles staying in the garage too long. Then you can have people solution to that, and you can show numbers and project it out. And when you can make it more tangible, often that becomes a better buy-in. The other thing I will caution against is, like, you want to have those ideas that you're going to solution against, because you might go buy the proverbial Porsche, but if you're only driving it down the driveway every day, it may not be as effective. You can find one of those 17 vendors, but find the one you really want. Find the tool you need and work towards that. Because if you're using blanket statements and saying, I would like to interject AI into my company, it's a little too nebulous, and you might want to focus that in. Here's where I think AI can be great. It can flag claims, it can run against our whole book, we can give it to our underwriting partners. Try and think to that next step, and then when you pitch it, it'll have tangible results.
This may seem really obvious, and so apologies if I'm oversimplifying, but one of the things that we've observed is that many organizations decide that they're going to adopt AI, but they don't have tangible before statements or tangible outcomes that they're measuring against. And so that seems just so basic, but essentially establishing the benchmarks, right? What are the results now, pre-AI, and what are the 2, 3, 5 metrics that we're going to measure and expect an impact, establish that up front, and then measure against it, is the most effective way to determine, is this doing what I expect it to do? Is it delivering the value that I anticipate? If not, why? Where is that getting in the way? And what other adjustments do I need to make? Some of it is just, it's nothing special to AI. It's sort of core business model challenges, but just because it's a shiny new thing doesn't mean we can abandon some of those core business model expectations. And those sort of standard practices can really help address the progress that's being made and point towards where adjustments are needed.
Be creative too, because to your point, sometimes you may have those 3 expected outcomes and you don't get those expected outcomes. It may just be a function of how you're utilizing the tool. A lot of claims people and underwriting people know their book of business inherently, and then when the AI can kind of lift up the hood and show you all these data points, doesn't mean you weren't sensing it incorrectly. It just means maybe you need to take those points and fine tune them a little bit, or take those expectations and fine tune them a little bit, and you may still then come to the outcome you desire. But you're never going to set it and forget it. It's not like, again, buying a car. I don't know, I'm making so many car analogies, but you got to continually go to your boards, go to your teams. I know, it's inbred in me, but you got to keep, like, on a regular basis, have these conversations. How does it affect your business, and how can you grow it? How can you make it more efficient?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that ultimately, as I sit and think about all the clients that we advise to, when you get clarity together, you get buy-in together with that KPI, I think it also then allows for a lot more uniformity together, more progress being made, what have you. So I would be curious, again, going back to you, like, what is the one metric, and maybe for everyone else on the panel too, that you think is most important that somebody should be tracking today? I know that's a loaded question.
At the end of the day, I actually think it is utilization, meaning this is what the tool recommended. How often is that what we did, right? And so I think that is going to drive any number of other outcomes, and it also points at the sort of change management concerns and where AI can go wrong. But I think that AI utilization, this was the recommendation, and we accepted that recommendation and actioned it 92% of the time. That tells me a lot. And it also gives me that 8% of the time that I want to go look at why some other decision was made and determine, does that mean I need to shift my model? Does that mean I need to do some coaching of a human? Or what is the outcome there?
Mine would be data accuracy. Find a way to measure how accurate your data is being and what you're delivering to your underwriting teams, to your actuarial teams. Make sure that they're getting the best information possible. However you go about figuring out how to do that from a claims perspective is going to pay a lot of dividends.
From my perspective, we have to figure out how to measure total claim outcome on claims in which we leveraged AI tools.
For me, I'll bring it back to claims for the buyer. I think looking at the actual outcome versus the expectation is an important metric to track, regardless of what you're doing, any investments you made. If you're not improving your outcomes, then it's really not worth it. So tracking that actual versus expected, I think, is really important, and I think a lot of people miss that.
So I could sit up here for a while, but maybe I'll end with one. But before I do that, any burning questions from the group here that we either didn't hit on or maybe we can explore after? That was my question as well, so that's spot on. Like, we didn't get into it. Litigation funding, right? We're seeing reform in certain states around that. We're seeing the speed of technology play out, right? I think that's kind of the question. I was going to ask a little differently, like, what looks the same in 2030 as it does today? But yeah, what evolves over the next 2 to 3 years?
Clip, I think it's got somewhere, that car got stuck
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely going there for some of the claims we talked about, comp claims, low-level auto claims, property claims, definitely going to, you don't even need a human in the room, right? For third-party liability claims, though, it's going somewhere I think different, and I'm very excited about, which is I'm going to be able to free up the humans to do where they contribute the most value. I want my team leveraging the best negotiation skills, the best evaluation skills, the best investigation, and a much more deeper investigation, and a better understanding of the litigation environment around them, third-party litigation, funding, et cetera. I do not want them doing some of these things they're doing now that take time on their desk that AI can come in and support them and do.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, regardless of the technology, regardless of the data, which is going to continue to advance, it's still a people business. And you said this before, we're always going to need people. We're always going to need adjusters. That's never going to change. It's just giving them the tools and the data to improve their workflow, improve the outcomes. But it's going to be a people business.
I'll just build on that and agree it is going to continue to be a people business. Saying that from the other side of the chair, in a claim setting, you're generally, working with or engaging with a human, a business, somebody who's having one of, if not the toughest experiences of their life, right? And so to the extent that AI and technology and trends can allow the humans in our business to show up in the way that is most beneficial for driving the right outcomes for those humans or businesses that are challenged or suffering, I think that's something that doesn't change, and I don't want us to lose sight of it. And I think that this technology and the evolution is making more time for focusing the powers and the empathy of the humans in our business to do the right thing in those scenarios.
It's so interesting too, because it comes up all the time in client conversations, is that's where you forge trust too, right? It's the people connection, it's the company connection, right? Making sure they're experiencing the right outcome, getting the right support too. That's so important. So that's where my head is, you went, as you mentioned.
And that's the promise we make. We promise to support them through that claim, which is the most difficult of their experiences sometimes, and we want to have more time to do that.
Look at that, like a good comedy skit. We got back to the punchline and landed the plane there. So, no, appreciate that, and I think it's a good spot to leave on, the empathy and the human element that's so important in our business and what we do as a society. So, again, on behalf of Casey and myself, thank you all for being here. Thank you for the engagement. How about a round of applause for the 4 panelists and their expertise. But again, with that, thank you all so much. We continue to do these throughout the year and hope to see you at many more of them. So thank you.
Yeah, Troy Wigner with Baringa. Yeah, I particularly thought it was really helpful to understand that others, not just myself, who is involved in change management consulting, that we're seeing change management come up as an opportunity for organizations, and that may be one of the differentiating factors that's helping folks come out as a leader in the future with AI.
This is Anurag. I lead the insurance charter for a company called Zorian. We are an applied intelligence company. Got an opportunity to attend the event organized by Lockton. I think my biggest takeaway was how each of the persona is thinking differently from an AI standpoint. There was a question about what metrics is more important, and it was interesting to see the product company having a metrics on utilization, on the data quality, but the business stakeholder have metrics on how it is actually impacting the business and the amount of claims that are being processed.
It was a great conversation, great participation from the audience, and I think continuing that conversation is going to go a long way as we continue to utilize AI, continue to expand how AI is deployed, and just improving that process to really reduce the total cost of risk. I appreciated the conversation around it being a human business. It is all built on relationships, and I think that that's not changing. So the more we can utilize data and utilize technology, I think goes a long way.
Great event. Always fun to bring the group together and share some meaningful content. Like we opened with here, hearing a lot of these questions come through, so it's amazing to have expert panelists be able to share that with the group. But I thought a great breakfast and a good start to the day.
And I think when you talk about claims, you talk about AI embedded in claims, it's important to never forget that this is very much a people industry. So as much data as we have, as much insight as we have, and what to do with it, and what person's role is going to provide value in the ultimate goal of the organization, I think it's important to realize that people have to anticipate and stay ahead of that equally as well.
I think that theme keeps coming up on every panel we do, whether it was the M&A or AI events, the empathy, the people, and how important those are to our industry, but also just executing in general. It's amazing that people keep hitting on that topic.
So I want to thank everyone for coming. Great day, great engagement from the audience, and really appreciate all the panelists' support. Until next time.